Hey everyone! So in this video I wanted to talk about how we can kind of start to figure out which of our thoughts we maybe should or shouldn't believe. And this is something that I used to really struggle with, and something I get asked a lot as well, because it's like, okay, well, if everything that's going through my head is thought, then how do I start to figure out which of those thoughts I should believe and act on? And the one thing that has helped me massively is starting to use my feelings as a really helpful guide, and that guide can really help me to kind of figure out which thoughts are helpful and which ones aren't. Because if I'm experiencing a feeling that is kind of sharp and spiky, the anxiety feelings, the feelings of worry and dread and feeling undeserving, unworthy, those kind of feelings, I can sort of start to notice those and use that as a really helpful indicator that actually maybe what I'm thinking in that moment isn't as helpful as I think it might be, or as a helpful alert that actually maybe I'm believing something that isn't serving me. So when I get that anxious feeling, I can stop, take a pause, and start to notice, what are those anxious thoughts that I'm having? What is it that I'm believing about maybe what might happen in the future? Am I getting caught up in a story about what may or may not happen, and then I'm feeling anxious about that? Am I caught up in a belief about, I don't know, something that I did in the past and what that means about me, or certainly something that I used to get caught up in a lot with when I was suffering from my eating disorder, about kind of feelings of guilt. And so now I know that actually those feelings aren't telling me that what I'm believing is helpful. Actually, it's telling me the exact opposite. It's almost like an inbuilt smoke alarm that is going off and telling us to be careful and be wary of what's going on in our heads and what we're taking seriously. And it's telling us that actually maybe there's an alternative route. Maybe it's time to just take a pause, take a step back, and start to question some of the stuff that's in our head. Because when we interrupt that cycle, because we can so easily get sucked in, we have a thought that maybe we've kind of thought a lot before and it's been on repeat for a long time, and it comes in and we recognize it, and it's maybe playing on our insecurities, and so we grab onto it and we start to interrogate it, and that leads to another thought and another thought and another thought, and before we know it, we're at the end of this rabbit hole and we're feeling awful. So what can we do to break that cycle? And I love the idea of a circuit breaker to kind of interrupt that flow, something to stop us before we get way down the end of that rabbit hole. And for me, that's a pause. And I've created another video on this, which we'll be sharing. But just taking that moment to stop, maybe just take a moment to reflect on, what is it that I'm feeling right now? And what are those feelings telling me about what is going on in my head? And then we can start to become quite kind of curious about whether or not we really want to be believing what we're believing in that moment, and starting to give ourselves permission to actually challenge that. And I used to be so afraid of what might happen if I didn't believe my thoughts. And often the answer would be that I would feel uncomfortable, and that those uncomfortable feelings might come back. But ultimately our feelings can't hurt us, which is so important and has been huge for me. I would so often try and get rid of those feelings or numb them or just kind of run in the opposite direction. But actually we don't need to do that. And if we start to see these feelings as a really helpful tool that can actually help us to get less caught up in these unhelpful thoughts and beliefs, then actually we can start to become less afraid of them. We can welcome them. And actually when what we would maybe traditionally think of as negative feelings, when they come along, actually, putting our investigation hat on, starting to get curious about what's going on. And I think then it becomes so much less stressful. And I certainly found that as I've gone along over the last few years, that I'm able to kind of untangle myself a lot quicker, a lot easier, and I'm giving myself that time and space to just allow myself to settle a little bit, and to actually give myself that permission to question what's going on in my head. So I hope this has been helpful. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and I will see you in the next video.